So let's continue from our last video. All right, so I opened up a new project here. All right, make sure we select C++. All right, and from the last first lesson, basically, we know that what we need to do is we need to include this statement using namespace std. So with that we can omit the std and the colons and directly use cout. Alright, so let me save it. Okay, so I'm going to call it lesson 2. Alright, so now if I run the program, you can see that it prints out hello world. Alright, so we covered some basics of output, okay, using cout in the first video, and today I'm going to cover the concept of capturing the user input. Alright, so when I want the user to provide me with the input, okay, so let's think of a simple program. Okay, so let me draw a simple flow chart for you to understand. So we start the program. Alright, so let's say the objective of the program is to ask the user to enter a number, alright, or enter two numbers, for example, and provide the sum of the two numbers. Alright, so first I say start, alright, then in the next step I say, okay, enter number 1, alright, that's the first number that I want to capture. And in the second step I say enter number 2. Alright, in the third step, after I have obtained both the numbers, I can say sum equals to num1 plus num2. Okay, and in the final step I can say I print the result. Okay, print out the result, and then that will be the end of the program. Okay, so it's a simple program where I want to capture two numbers from the user, compute the sum, and finally print it out. Alright, so now let's look at this. Now to capture a number, okay, so to capture a number or capture any input from the user, we need to be able to store that input somewhere. Okay, we need to be able to store the input somewhere. Now in the concept of programming, this location where information is stored, okay, for data and so on, is what we call variables, okay, or variable. Okay, so what is a variable? Alright, so to make it very simple, you think of a variable as something that is equivalent to a container. Alright, so I have a container and I can put something inside, anything that I want. Alright, so of course there are different types of containers depending on what you want to put in. Alright, but for now, let's just simplify things and say that a variable is a container. So when I say that I want to perform this action, okay, this action of entering a number, alright, when the user enters that number, that value, that data that I key in must go into a container. Alright, and I can have multiple containers to hold multiple data. Alright, so I can have a container for calling it num1, and I can have another container calling it num2. Alright, so when the user keys in a second input, that will go into a second container. Alright, now when how do I tell the program that I want to create this container or a variable? I need to specify what is known as the data type. Alright, now again we will cover more details later, but for now there are many different data types, okay, and what we will look at, okay, so there are many different data types, and what we will look at for now is basically the type called integer. Okay, so integer data type is meant to hold whole numbers, okay, 1, 5, 28, 2010, anything. Alright, and to declare an integer, I must use the keyword int followed by the variable name. Alright, so that is the idea of data types and integer. Alright, so let me go ahead and do that in the code. Alright, so First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to declare an integer. So I'm going to say int num1. Alright, so when I declare int num1, okay, I'm creating a container that I can use to capture the data that is entered by the user. Okay, so I'm going to change this. Instead of hello world, I'm going to say enter number 1. Okay, now how do I capture the input from the user? Cout is to print something to the output screen. To capture, I must use the keyword cin. Okay, and the arrows are to the right. Okay, so when I say cin, I am telling the program that I want to now capture an input from the user and I want to store it into a container. So which is the container? Currently I have num1. Correct? So that is what is happening here. Okay, so when I run this program, okay, let's save this and run it. Okay, so now you see that when I run the program, the first line is cout enter num1, and now you see that there is actually the cursor that is blinking. Alright, why is the cursor blinking? Because the next line is cin. So when we execute a cin, when the program executes a cin, it knows that it has to wait for the user to provide an input. Okay, so let's say now I key in a value of 7 and I press enter. Okay, so of course now the program is not doing anything else, but where did this 7 go? This 7 went into the container called num1. Alright, so that is the idea you must understand. So when I executed cin, alright, it captured whatever input and it was stored into num1. Alright, now I can do the same thing now for the next variable num2. Alright, so I can just copy this. Okay, and I'm going to say this enter number 2, and this time round it will go into num2. Okay, so let's save and let's run this one more time. So you can see the first time I asked the user, okay, value of 5. Second time, value of 4. Alright, so what has happened? When I run the program, 5, the first input went into the container num1. The second input 4 went into the container num2. Alright, so that is where we are right now. Now over here, I am going to perform the sum of num1 and num2. Okay, I'm going to perform the sum, which is the addition. Now, since sum is going to is a new is the output of the addition, alright, I can create another container to hold it. Alright, that means over here what I can do is I can say that I want to create another variable or container called sum, so that when num1 adds with num2, when I perform this addition, this answer will now come into sum. Okay, so to do that I can create another variable integer sum, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say sum equals to num1 plus num2. Alright, so this is what we call an operation. Correct, we are carrying out an operation, alright, or a procedure based on the input that we have already captured from the user. So we have captured num1 and num2 from the user, so all the data that we want is already available, so we can go ahead to perform any computation. So we are performing the addition and assigning it to the variable sum. Alright, and as the last step, okay, we want to print the sum. Alright, so let's do a print again. So we know how to do a cout. Okay, so cout, okay, the sum is, alright, so now I want to print out the value that is inside the container sum. So what I can do is I can just put the name of the variable or the container, which is sum, and that value will be printed out. Okay, the sum is, alright, and I'm putting in this container name, which is sum, and that sum is already the answer obtained from the addition of num1 plus num2. Okay, so let me save this and let me run one more time. So I'm going to enter two numbers, 5, 2, and the answer is 7. The sum is 7. Alright, so again, let me run through again. For C out, we are printing something to the screen. Alright, whatever you want to print to the screen is within the double quotes. When I want to capture an input from the user, I use C in. But when I use C in, the arrows are to the right. Alright, so when I say C in, I am capturing something from the user and I must place that information into a container. So a container is basically a variable. So I need to first declare the variable in my code. So in this case, num1 is declared here as an integer. That means it can hold whole numbers. And I do that 2 times, correct? So enter number 1, enter number 2. So each time I put into 2 separate containers. Okay. So once I've done that, based on the flowchart, I already have obtained all the information that I want. So I compute the sum. So when I compute the sum, I say sum equals to num1 plus num2, and then I can print it out. Alright, so this gives you a better idea of how to use C out and C in together. Alright, so thank you for watching. Bye.